The world is watching a war that isn't confined to the battlefield. It's being fought in factories, across supply chains, and at the core of industrial power itself. And the truth is stark. Ukraine isn't losing because of a lack of courage. It's losing because it's running out of ammunition. That is the reality. A single $50 billion package could mean the difference between survival and collapse. But the real horror isn't the size of the number. It's the timing. The West is running out of time to rebuild what it spent decades dismantling. Europe tore down its warfighting capacity, and now the clock is merciless. Every second of delay is measured in lives. If support doesn't arrive soon, the battlefield won't just shift, it will fracture, and the world will wake up to a war it was never truly prepared to fight. Now, here's what Peter Zeihan said.
Every little bit helps, but to say one thing is going to be decisive when you've got a land war and a front that's over 1,500 kilometers long, I think is a bit of a stretch. Using the interest from the frozen Russian investments, though, honestly, that was a stroke of genius. I don't know who came up with that one, but I want to buy them a drink because it basically finds a nice little loophole in international law that only pisses off the Russians and nobody else. I mean, that was very well done. Whether $50 billion in one pop and what'll probably be around $10 to $15 billion a year moving on is enough to move the needle. I mean, it doesn't hurt. But, if Ukraine wins this, they're going to need $1 trillion US.
Yeah, I suppose I mean not the $50 billion per se, but that if they get enough, if they get the kind of support they need right now, I mean, it could make all the difference, couldn't it?
I'm not sure that support is available. And I don't think it's a question of will or red lines. The United States, when it fights a war, it fights with reach and precision over volume. And the Europeans, for the most part, have pretended until very recently that war was in the past, and so they allowed their military-industrial complexes to atrophy. We're now in a conflict that has more similarities with World War I than World War II or Vietnam or even much less the Desert Storm. And that means artillery, and that means building up the industrial plant that's necessary to build that artillery. And those processes are being developed, not just in the United States, especially in Europe, but it takes time. And $50 billion is really useful, but these things still aren't going to be providing the volume of artillery shells that the Ukrainians need this year or next year.
Peter Zeihan warns that the real problem isn't the money, it's the clock. The question is not whether the West can fund Ukraine, but whether it can deliver support fast enough to matter. Decades of industrial decay have hollowed out Western military production, leaving Europe dangerously unprepared for a war that looks far less like a modern conflict and far more like World War I. This war consumes artillery at a brutal pace, and rebuilding that capacity takes years. Even massive funding today may not translate into usable ammunition this year, or even the next. And just when it seems the war will be decided by budgets, politics, and endless debates in distant capitals, Ukraine detonates a shockwave that shatters every assumption about how wars are fought. If Zeihan's warning was about the industrial clock running out, what follows proves that the battlefield itself has already changed. Not through tanks or jets, but through innovation, agility, and a ruthless new doctrine. Russia expected a slow grind, a predictable war of attrition. Instead, Ukraine unveiled weapons so unexpected and so disruptive that Russian commanders have been left stunned, scrambling to rewrite their own equations of war. Ukraine's ingenuity isn't merely surprising Russia. It is erasing the ancient math of warfare. The age of face-to-face battles, trench lines, and mass formations is ending. A new era has begun, one where machines hunt humans, and the human cost is no longer measured by sheer numbers. Russia's numerical superiority, its vast army and endless manpower, is suddenly meaningless. Silicon intelligence and technological agility now dominate the battlefield. Russian generals who once relied on brute force and predictable tactics now fear something that looks almost harmless: a small civilian off-road vehicle. At first glance, it resembles a recreational buggy. In reality, it is silent, fast, and lethal, carrying one of the world's most advanced anti-tank and anti-air missiles, a system usually mounted on million-dollar Apache helicopters. Russia believed it ruled the skies with cheap drones. But hidden among trees and bushes, these vehicles are rewriting the air war. Imagine a swarm of Shahid drones gliding through the night, expecting no resistance. No Patriot batteries, no radar towers. What awaits them instead is far worse: a quiet off-road buggy armed with devastating firepower. This is Ukraine's Tempest system. According to battlefield reports, these vehicles have already destroyed 21 Russian aircraft. 21, a number that turns the idea of Russian air dominance into a lie. The weapon behind this shift is a V-2X Tempest, a deceptively simple system that mounts AGM-114 Hellfire missiles onto a highly maneuverable 4x4 chassis known commercially as the Canadian Maverick. But this isn't just a technical modification. It's a doctrinal revolution. Tempest has become one of Ukraine's most critical counters to unmanned aerial threats. Russian Shahid and Garand drones targeted power grids, cities, and civilians, forcing Ukraine to intercept $20,000 drones with multi-million-dollar systems like Patriot and Iris-T, an unsustainable economic equation. Tempest flipped that math. Mounted on an agile platform, Hellfire missiles are no longer confined to drone defense. They can strike helicopters, low-flying aircraft, and even ground targets. Footage released on January 13th, including interviews with Ukrainian Air Force personnel, confirmed the system is fully operational. Operators reported 21 confirmed Shahid kills using Tempest alone. Vehicles costing a few $100,000 halted attack waves worth millions. What makes this possible is the Longbow Hellfire missile. Unlike laser-guided systems, these missiles are fire and forget. They carry their own radar brain. Fog, snow, darkness, none of it matters. Once launched, the missile finds its target independently. In winter conditions, escape is impossible. Tempest strikes, relocates, and vanishes before retaliation can begin. Unlike bulky air defense batteries, Tempest slips into forests, swamps, and terrain where traditional systems cannot operate. It ambushes, fires, and disappears in seconds. While Russia spends months producing air defense systems, Ukraine can field these vehicles in weeks. War production has been compressed. Some argue it's wasteful to fire a $150,000 missile at a $20,000 drone, but war economics aren't grocery shopping. A single drone hitting a power plant causes billions in damage. That missile is an expense. It's an insurance policy. And many of these missiles come from U.S. stockpiles nearing expiration, making their effective cost nearly zero. Tempest doesn't just destroy drones. It destroys Russia's cost advantage. Its most terrifying feature is ghost mode. Unlike traditional radar systems, Tempest does not emit signals. It listens. Passive sensors detect engine noise and signatures. By the time the enemy realizes it's there, the missile is already airborne. Death arrives silently, and Tempest is only the beginning. This war has entered a phase where machines fight as proxy armies. Humans no longer charge forward, they command systems that do. Ukraine deployed unmanned ground vehicles at scale at the start of the year, and what followed looked like science fiction. On January 6, 2026, a Russian soldier surrendered not to another man, but to an unmanned Ukrainian combat robot. He laid down his weapon, raised his hands, and was transported into captivity by the very machine that captured him. Russia's once impregnable trench lines, minefields, and concrete defenses are cracking under robotic siege. This doctrine is simple. Transfer risk to machines, protect human lives. While Russia clings to World War II-era human wave tactics, Ukraine has quietly built an integrated robotic force. These are not toys. They are frontline units, armed with machine guns and grenade launchers, operating at night using thermal vision that detects even cigarette smoke. Against cold metal, silicon chips, and hydraulic arms, human fear becomes irrelevant. Mercy comes only from a distant operator behind screen. And above the battlefield, another nightmare unfolds. Fiber-optic-controlled FPV drones. Russia's billions spent on electronic warfare are rendered useless by a technology as simple as a cable. These drones carry hair-thin fiber spools stretching up to 50 kilometers. No radio signals. Nothing to jam. Operators receive crystal-clear HD footage deep inside Russian territory. Russian tanks, once protected by distance and jamming, are now exposed. Logistics hubs once considered safe no longer exist. Supply convoys are hunted the moment they move. Logistics, the stomach of an army, is being strangled. Ukraine has even deployed drone motherships that release swarms behind enemy lines. AI guidance ensures strikes continue even if connections are lost. Russian reconnaissance drones are caught mid-air by net-launching interceptors. Blinded, Russian artillery fires blindly, while Ukraine sees everything. This is not just a tactical defeat. It is the collapse of Soviet doctrine. Russia bet on mass, more men, more tanks, more shells. The images from January prove that bet has failed. Iron and blood cannot compete with silicon and code. While Russia spends millions on a tank, Ukraine can destroy it with systems built in a single day. Ukraine didn't reveal a new weapon. It revealed a new era, and the world is watching.